Okay, so I'm going to skip a little bit ahead for this video and show you something cool rather than something functional. So let's create a 3D grid of objects. Let's do 5 by 5 by 5 like that. And if I add a mesh network and add dynamics to it, again, rewind and play, you get that, fair enough, whatever. And then if I add a sphere underneath, like so, and I make the sphere a collider object, like so, just rewind and hit play, and we get that, and that's fair enough. So Mesh Dynamics has a super cool feature I'm really happy with, and it is constraints. So if I just add a constraint object, constraint node, and view this from the top down, you'll see we have automatically generated a whole mess of constraints on top of these objects. So what a constraint is, it will join shapes together. Well, it do many things. It will join shapes together, glue them together, or it will add springs to objects, or it will connect them to other mesh networks, or connect them to specific points, and all this kind of thing. So what we'll do is, to show you a very basic example of this, I will change the constraint search distance to something like, let's say, 1.5, and then we can see we have a grid of constraints. So these objects are, by default, the constraint type is glue. They're all glued together. So if I hit 4 here, you can see that we have this nice grid of things that glued together. If I change that to 6, you can see everything is stuck together. Wonderful. Okay, cool. So now if I press play, we get this. We just get the objects all stuck together, balancing on top of our sphere, and then kind of sliding off, and then bouncing on the floor together. Cool, okay. So now the fun starts when you start doing things like making the constraints breakable. So if we rewind and hit play again, we have these chunks of objects, and then they can all break apart when a force is, acting on the object is greater than 2. So magnitude is greater than 2, I should say. So that's pretty cool, but in itself, it's not so mind-blowing. However, we have this really cool feature called connection masking. Now, what connection masking allows us to do is it allows us to use a texture to control what objects can connect to what objects. So this could be anything like a volume noise, but to show a really simple example, let's just add a ramp. So I'm just going to add a ramp. And by default, our ramp is a V ramp, so it's a vertical ramp, so it's going up and down like this. And so it has separated our objects into slices. So if I change this to a U ramp, which is kind of more in line with what we have on the in the attribute editor, then that makes kind of more sense because now it's an analog. You can see that we have changed our object kind of into slices. And then if I rewind and hit play, you can see that we have everything split into slices. So nothing across a slice is connected to each other. So I'm just going to turn off breakable and so you can see more what's going on. So we've now created slices of objects, which is pretty fun. So we can go back in here and we can do cool things like change this to a diagonal ramp, radial ramp, and you know what? I'm going to add some more objects so that this is more obvious. So let's add 8 in each direction and then like spread these out a bit more. Something like that. Where were we? I was just playing with the ramp types. Constraint through to the ramp, and then circular ramp like so, or box ramp, which is pretty cool actually. Let's stop at box ramp and press play, and we get this, which is pretty fun. Everything's struggling to fit around the outside of the sphere. I'm just going to shrink that slightly so I don't have to play with the collision settings. And then we get that, which is fun. So what would be cool in the situation is if we make the constraint breakable. So let's do that. So we've got like concentric rings of cubes. And then if we just make this breakable, we've got like a super cool and slightly kind of complex effect really, really quickly and easily. So let's change the breakable threshold to 4, and then I'm going to go into the ground plane and I'm going to turn the friction up, and then I'll turn the friction up on the dynamics here as well. Just to make it slightly more interesting. And then that's what you get. So it's pretty fun, complex effects set up like within just a few clicks. So let's dump the map mask. Actually, what I'm going to do is I will show you the color threshold here underneath as well. So if I change this back to a U ramp, you see where I've got everything arranged in slices here. If I change the color threshold, what I can do is you change the amount a texture color needs to change. Now it's always done in black and white, so you change the amount the value needs to change in order for objects to not connect to each other. So you can actually like make larger groups of objects by messing with the color threshold. Sorry. So you can make thinner ones just with the default's pretty low. So actually let's dump the map mask and then let's add something like a volume noise. Oh, if I can find it. What's it called? Volume noise. Don't let me search for it. There it is, volume noise. So if we had a volume noise, we end up getting like a kind of a 3D pattern of shapes. So things are connected around corners and then yeah, so it's much more random. So you end up with much more random groups of things connected to each other. And then you can change the maximum constraint to something like, I don't know, 3, so that you don't get any large groups, but they're kind of still random. And then if we play this back, turn breakable off, just so you can see, we've got kind of random sized chunks of objects that are all kind of interlocked and kind of messed up. Yeah, and then if we turn breakable on, but the setting's quite high here, you end up with odd groups of objects stuck together still, which is pretty cool. So yeah, that's a very quick look at the constraint connection masking. I appreciate I have skipped ahead in these tutorials, but I just wanted to show you something fun and cool. So there you go, and then I think the next one is going to be back to something slightly more sedate and perfunctory. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that.